This is Gemara Baba Basra, Daf Lamid Zayin. And we're holding in the bottom of Lamid Vav Amid Beis, quoting the last line in our Mishnah, 5 lines from the bottom, which is Amar Rabbi Yishmael Bamedvar Mamurim Bisada Halavan. Says the Gemara, and really this is going to piggyback off of a brisa that was quoted at the end of the previous year, the brisa that taught us that according to Rabbi Yishmael, how do you create a chazaka? The way to create a chazaka is Gimel Yigdar. If you just look 4 lines up, Gimel Gedeirais, you say Gimel Betzirais, Yimsaik, Gimel Masikois. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yishmael, Amar Rabbi, Rabbi Yishmael Nishal Rabbanan. According to Rabbi Yishmael, we can understand the din of the Rabbanan in the following case. If someone has 30 trees, mimata asara lebeis sa, planted 10 per besa, achlasara b'shanazu, v'asara b'shanazu, v'asara b'shanazu. Each year he eats 10 trees worth of produce, thereby equaling up to the 30 trees in the whole field. Harezu chazaka, that will be a chazaka. Even though really each year he only ate a third of the entire field, since at the end of the 3 years the entire field was harvested, says Abaye, from the fact that Rabbi Yishmael taught us that what is necessary is 3 different types of trees, the Chachamim that disagree, say Abaye, must be they would even allow a third of the crop each year. Says the Gemara as we turn over to Lamed Zayin Amar Aleph. Where do we see this from? Lav mi Amar Rabbi Yishmael. Explains the Gemara. Did Rabbi Yishmael not hold Chad Peira Have Chazaka Likulu Peri? Rabbi Yishmael was of the opinion that one crop works for all crops. Rabbi Yishmael said that if the 3 different types of foods each year, he could go, each year, he could go and utilize one of the 3 crops, and in totality, he'll have a chazaka on the whole field. Hachanami, so to over here, have a chazaka, hachanami, have honey, have a chazaka lahani. So to over here, that according to the Chachamim, these will be a chazaka for these. V'hani have a chazaka lahani, and these will be a chazaka for these. The Rabbi Yishmael's chiddush was twofold. Was number one, was number one that utilizing 1/3 of the field is enough, and 3 crops is enough. The Chachamim don't hold that 3 crops are enough, but we have no reason to assume, say Abaye, that they argue about 1/3 of the field. So as long as we have 30 trees all the same, and he's utilizing 1/3 of the trees, but the entire crop, the entire year, according to the Chachamim, say Abaye, that should work. But Vahani Mili, 3 lines down, Lamzayinam and Aleph, Heicha, Teloyafiku. Says the Gemara, this is only if the other 20 trees didn't have fruit that year, and you harvested 10 with fruit, and then 10 with fruit, and then 10 with fruit. However, but says Abayi, according to the Chachamim, let's say all 30 trees had fruit, but you only went and harvested 10. Loi have chazaka futebazi bazuzi, and says the Gemara, and furthermore, when do we say that 10 trees can eventually affect 1/3 of a chazaka, which will combine to have a full chazaka? That's only if they're scattered throughout the entire field. But if they're in an isolated area, it will not. So 2 qualifications in the way that Abaye is learning up the shita of the Chachamim. Says the Gemara, segueing into a little bit of a different case. One has a chazaka on ilanais, v'zeh hechzik bekarka. And one creates a chazaka on the karka. We have a person that sells a field and trees to two different people. So says the Gemara, one guy made a chazaka on the land, one made a chazaka on the tree. What's the halacha? Amar Rav Zid, zekon ilanis, zekon karka. Very simple. The one that had a chazaka on the trees gets only the trees. One that's on the land gets only the land. Says the Gemara, Maskla Rapapa asks Rapapa, Imkini lo bali lanais bekarka klum. It comes out fascinating. The one who owns the trees has no right in the land. If that's true, Lema bal karka lo bali lanais. So the guy who made the chazaka on the karka could tell the guy with the trees, Akri lanchash kol vizel. Guess what? You have a chazaka of trees. Okay, pull them up, uproot them, and get out of here. You have no chazaka on land. You have a chazaka of trees in my land. So take your trees and go fly a kite. So says Rabba, that can't be. The one that's kind of the ilanais acquires half the land underneath the trees, etc. Whereas the other is kind of the other half of the land, and therefore, the owner of the trees has some level of bailus in the karka. So much so, explains the Rashbam, if the tree dies, he could replant the tree in that area, that part of the land in which the tree is on, he has bailus of it. Says the Gemara Pshita. The following is Pashit, 4 lines to the end of Lamed Zayin Amar Aleph. Machar karka v'shayri ilanais lefanaf. So-and-so land, and he kept the trees for himself. Yesh le karka. Of course, he retains some level of the karka around the trees for himself, and if the trees die, etc., he can replant them. V'afilu Rav Akiva d'amar moicher bayin yafa moicher. Rav Akiva holds in general that when someone sells something, we'll get to this eventually in about a month, that you sell bayin yafa, that when you sell an item in your field to someone else, do you retain the usage to get to that item? Hani Mili says, it's only gabe baru dos, a pit or a cistern. It doesn't weaken the ground. Only there does Rav Akiva say that if you sold it, you sold it. And you don't even retain the rights to get to that area. Why? The reason is because he's selling something which isn't ruining the land. And therefore, he doesn't retain anything to himself. We'll see the contrast, how this works out clearly. Aval ilanois. But let's say you sell ilanois to someone else, which are what? As we turn over to Lamzayim Beis, to come a chashi ba'ara. An ilan, by its very nature, of course, weakens the ground, as the top Rashbam spells out. Hashroshim bakarka. The roots in the ground weaken the ground, and the tree prevents the plowing at some level. Makiv the macharisha, it could hold back the plowing. Therefore, shiurei shayir, Rav Akiva agrees that he must hold back some of the land for himself. Why? Because if he didn't hold anything back for himself, the buyer could tell him, the buyer could say, get rid of your trees and get out of here. And therefore, it must be that the seller retains some level of rights to the land around the trees. And even Rabbi Akiva, who generally holds that when you sell something, you don't retain any rights. But when it comes to a tree that is intrinsically connected and weakens and needs the ground, Rav Akiva will hold that some rights are maintained. And on the flip side, says Rav Akiva, what about Machri Lanis V'Shayir Karka? So that was, again, let's just get the case clear. That was a case where you're selling the karka and you're keeping the trees. Again, I might have said it backwards. Let's just say it one more time. You're selling the land. I have a land. I'm selling you my land. I'm keeping the trees. But because my trees inherently weaken the land, meaning they're using the land at some level, of course I'm retaining rights to get to my trees. If the tree dies, to replant something, and not that you could tell me, oh, I bought your land, take your trees and fly a kite. But says the Gemara, what about on the flip side? He kept land for himself. Plug to the Rav Kiva Rabban. The Rav Kiva Damar Machabayin Yafa Meicher. So if over here when he sold the trees, Islay, then the buyer has rights to the trees. The Rabbanan, lastly. According to Rabbanan, no. The buyer has no land around the trees. Therefore, if the tree dies, there's nothing he can do. Ask the Gemara, the Rav Kiva Islay. According to Rav Kiva, the buyer has land. Excuse me, the Rav Kiva Islay. Va'afilu the Rav Zvid, 6 lines down. The Amar ein loy, hani mili gabi shnei lekuchais. That's only where there were 2 buyers. Why? Damar lekechet l'didi les levi lanais, l'dididcha nami les l'cha bekarka. According to Rav Zvid, when there are 2 buyers, one buying land and one buying trees, that's when he holds Leslie. That's the reason is because each Ketaina, the one who bought the land, could say, just like just if I don't own your trees, of course, because you bought the trees. Guess what? You don't own my land. Go fly a kite if the tree dies. But over here, which is again a case in which someone is selling the Ilanois and leaving over the karka, as we saw on the 3rd line. In that case, that he would be, Rav Zvid would be maskim to Rav Akiva, that you also get some ownership of the land, and in the event that the tree dies, you could indeed replant something in its place. Says the Gemara, according to the Rabbanan Leslie, Vafilu Rav Papa Damar Yeshloi, Hani Mili Gamishtei Lekuchas. Now the flip side, the Rabbanan that hold that the buyer of the trees does not get an ownership in the karka is even according to the Rav Papa, who says usually you do. That's only by the exact flip side. When there's 2 buyers, Rav Papa says that's only in a case where each one can say, what do you mean? Just like your trees inherently are in my land gets some usage of your trees. And therefore, even according to Rav Papa say the Rabbanan, you would not get usage, and if the tree dies, you cannot replant it. We'll stop over here, as the next daf is a very short one, and therefore we'll pick it up from here, from the Ardai B'siyata Dishmaya.